Hey everyone, you're listening to Angel Nears, the podcast. Angel Nears is a Silicon Valley community for startup builders where experienced operators share their firsthand knowledge on how to build and scale startups. I'm your host, Oleg Kujakov, and our guest today is Evangelos Simoudis, a seasoned venture investor with 20 years of experience, advisor to global corporations, and a recognized thought leader in big data, digital platforms, and corporate innovation. Prior to his investing work, Evangelos has spent 20 years in high tech industries in executive roles spanning operations, marketing, sales, and engineering. He's also the author of books, The Big Data Opportunity in Our Driverless Future and Transportation Transformation. Today, we're talking with Evangelos about the next generation mobility. But before we get into that, Evangelos, welcome to the show.
Oleg, thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
All right, real excited to have you here. Let's get started by learning a little bit more about you. Tell us about yourself and how you got started in this business.
I studied engineering and my PhD is in computer science and AI. I've been in artificial intelligence since roughly 1982, 1983. Like many folks, started in an engineering career, moved to startups and did a couple of those. And after selling my second startup, I moved to the venture side. I was invited to join the partnership of Apex Partners, which was a large private equity firm. Then joined the partnership of Trident Capital, more of a typical Silicon Valley IT venture investor. And 5 years ago, with one of my partners from Trident, we started our current firm, Synapse Partners. So over a course of, as you said in your introduction, about 40 years, I've gone from engineering to entrepreneurship to more recently helping entrepreneurs with investments and coaching and all of that. Everything that's needed for building a successful startup. And I've been doing this for about 20 years now as an investor. And more recently, because of the opportunities that we see in particularly in the application of data to mobility through AI, spending a lot more time again in that area. So you can think of it as coming full circle from over a course of 40 years from starting with AI and now again getting my hands real dirty with AI, both investing and advising.
Well, you sound like the perfect kind of guest for the podcast, wealth of experience and duration of experience. I want to learn a little bit more about your firm. Tell us about Synapse Partners.
We started Synapse about 5 years ago, and we felt that as AI started making a comeback, particularly with data-driven AI, there will be a big opportunity for in the area of enterprise software, which is an area that my partner and I knew very well. And so we created this specialized firm to invest exclusively in AI, in applications in that involve at the core they have AI. And we felt that in order to better understand what to invest in and how to help corporations with AI, we better start forming close relationships with them. So in the intervening 5 years now, we have been working with 10 different corporations from a couple of different industries. And the interactions that we have with them allow us to both better understand their problems and in this way identify startups that can successfully address such problems. But also, in the process of doing that, we have been advising the corporations themselves both on how to best take advantage of startups, but also how to refine and modify their strategies in order to take best advantage of AI in general.
Okay, and next tell us about the books. What do you write about and why?
So I've always been writing and teaching actually over the years, but when new mobility, particularly through the all the noise that had been created around autonomous vehicles, started coming to the surface, I saw the role that data and AI can play in new mobility. So I started writing a series of blogs. Blogs became speeches. The speeches turned out into my first book. It's called The Big Data Opportunity in Our Driverless Future. And as I continued to write, I saw kind of like the bigger issues that are involved and have to be involved if we are to make new mobility a reality. And that has led to my second book, as you said, transportation transformation. More recently, I've been writing about telework and the role of AI and automation in employment, because I think that this will impact quite significantly even transportation, and we even saw it during the pandemic. But I believe again, because of the role that data and AI can play, I feel that I need to provide some sort of an education, some sort of an analysis, which a book format allows me to do. Sometimes blogs do not.
Mhm. Very interesting. Next, let's talk about the industry of mobility. And I want to talk about the future. And in order to get there, I think it makes sense to ask about the present. So, what is the current state of next generation mobility?
Well, again, so when I look at next generation mobility, I look at essentially three constituencies, right? I look at automakers and their ecosystem. I look at mobility services, so companies that provide ride hailing, goods delivery, micro mobility, and then I look at cities, and because they provide the infrastructure as well as some transportation. So what we've seen with actually pre-pandemic is that certain segments of the population, particularly urban population, had started embracing mobility services quite aggressively. Because again, if we were to net it out, what consumers want from their transportation is they want to have safe, affordable, and convenient transportation. And more recently, I think what we have been adding to these three dimensions is the notion of equitable transportation. So, again, what the pre-pandemic experience has shown us, that mobility services provide convenience to a few segments of the population, but not to everybody. And the second aspect, the second kind of like the fifth dimension, if you will, is environmental friendliness, right? So we want transportation that will be non-polluting. So during the pandemic, pre-pandemic, we've seen this, as an embracing of multimodal mobility services, and also some return back to public transportation, especially in cities like New York, like San Francisco, DC. I'm talking about here in the US, and then obviously outside the US, public transportation is a lot more embraced than here. Post-pandemic, we've seen a cratering of public transportation as people sought to use privately owned vehicles a lot more, primarily for health safety reasons. And we've also seen the emergence from a mobility services perspective. We've seen the emergence of the goods delivery services, whether it is for grocery delivery or food delivery, both prepared and other type of foods, as well as packages. So we're waiting now to see what is going to happen post-pandemic. Automakers have been doing quite well because consumers have flocked to buy more vehicles. The latest numbers show that 2021 will probably be one of the best years that automakers have had in terms of private vehicle sales. We've also been doing mobility services that have goods delivery, have been doing quite well. And we're waiting to see whether the ride sharing, ride hailing type of the share mobility services will come back up post pandemic. So that's gives you kind of like a broad overview of what has been happening on the consumer front.
Next, can you talk about automotive OEMs? What are they and what might the future hold for them?
OEMs pre-pandemic have been at a crossroads, and I write quite a bit about that in the book. And that they have been dealing with technology challenges, how to embrace electrification, for example, and other forms of environmentally friendly powertrains, as well as whether autonomous vehicles, whether how to embrace autonomy and how much autonomy to introduce to their vehicles, and also how to deal with mobility services, because they were seeing a significant impact, particularly in urban mobility, coming from as the populations were embracing mobility services. I think during the pandemic, and now as we're as we're starting to finally think about a post-pandemic period, automakers are, I think, they're spending a lot more time in with electrification. You see, for example, the investments that companies like GM and Volkswagen are making on electrified vehicles and the various models that we'll be introducing. By and large, I see, I won't call it yet an abandonment of mobility services, but certainly a reconsideration of the mobility services plans that they had. So if you look at companies like GM, like Daimler, and Renault, that had even Volkswagen, that had very aggressive programs to introduce mobility services to certain cities around the world. Those have been scaled back. And then with regards to autonomous vehicles, I think also those uh, projections that OEMs were making have been moderated. So whereas before we were talking about a lot of them introducing fully autonomous vehicles, kind of level 4, level 5 driving automation. Right now, whether it is in Asia or in Europe or even here in the US, we're seeing a lot more uh, plans around level 2, level 3 levels of driving automation, which is similar to what Tesla has had for a while now.
Hmm. Yeah, it does feel like these kind of technologies are being embraced. Let's move on to the ecosystem and value chains. Talk about mobility services and their future prospects.
Mobility services, as I said, they saw their usage, especially those that had been focusing on passenger transportation, whether it is micromobility, microtransit, ride hailing, ride sharing. um, they saw their business crater because people were not moving, right? So so right now, I think in some of them, like in the case of Uber, like in the case of Lyft here in the US, they started moving to a more hybrid model where they're not only providing passenger mobility, but they're also providing goods delivery. I mean, the success, for example, of Uber Eats has been well documented during the pandemic. And so, on the one hand, they're talking about how the ridership is going to come back up as more people are starting to go back to work, as the mobility within urban areas is starting to increase. But a lot of them are also thinking how to continue building on this hybrid model that they have developed and expand their services. By and large, companies like Uber, like Lyft, that had very active autonomous vehicles development programs. I think they have given those up because they now that they are public companies. They need to think a lot more aggressively about short-term profitability, and the autonomous vehicle programs were becoming significant money sinks for them. So I think they will be looking to partner with autonomous vehicle technology providers. In the case of Uber, you see them coming closer to Aurora. I think we'll see similar kind of partnerships. You see Lyft coming closer to Motional and Aptiv. So I think we'll see more of those partnerships emerge in the future. And I think in the case, more broadly, you'll see these companies focusing more regionally and developing and showing their business models scale on a regional basis and seeing how they can turn to consistent profitability. That's what I see, especially for the next couple of years for these companies.
Yeah, those are some really interesting predictions. Could you keep talking about new mobility and discuss the value chain?
I think it's important. I mean, we've talked about, we talked a little bit about new mobility, but I think it's important to define it. So, if I were to define new mobility, I would say it's the movement of people and goods using vehicles that are electrified, autonomous or automated, and obviously connected, and also the combination of vehicles and services. So that means that we need to have the right infrastructures, both digital and physical infrastructure for these vehicles and services to operate in. We need to have the right data flows, the right software capabilities. So that's why I keep saying that new mobility is about vehicles, about services, about infrastructure. It's about obviously business models. We were talking about this a couple of minutes ago with regards to mobility services and automakers. And around this, all of these components, there's data and AI, which become the glue that bring all these together. So that's what makes up new mobility. Now, as you correctly pointed out, when these ingredients start to come together, when these components start to come together, there are new value chains that will be developed. Now, these value chains will consist of both companies from the incumbent automotive and transportation systems, but where we as investors become extremely excited is because we see opportunities for startups to play a major role in these new value chains, because these value chains will include players from industries that traditionally have not been associated with transportation and mobility and automakers, right? So industries such as entertainment. So we see, as the vehicle becomes more autonomous, we see the opportunity to have a variety of content, digital content in the cabin. Hospitality industries, I mean, they will be very interested in offering certain services as part of mobility. Utilities, obviously, again, if you have electrified vehicles or fuel cell based vehicles, utilities become a very integral part in the same way that we had gas stations for internal combustion engines. Healthcare industries are extremely interested. So imagine, for example, you have a vehicle that can sense the health condition of its passengers, and if or even the driver, and if it senses an emergency, it can automatically drive you to a hospital or to some facility that can provide such services. So we're seeing a number of industries becoming very interested in this new mobility, and that's what will create these new value chains, as I mentioned.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating. What you said about entertainment kind of my head went directly to like in-flight entertainment, planes with movies and the whole industry there, and the connectivity and technology. It opens up so many opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. Just before the pandemic, I was in India, and it's very common there to have buses that travel overnight, equipped with beds, equipped with certain even today certain entertainment capabilities. Typically DVD related. Imagine all this being offered to you dynamically, very much like you have on the plane, and where you have a much broader array of options to choose from. And imagine the bus being autonomous. Again, over if you're driving out on the highway where the operating design domain, as it's called, it's much more controlled. We see autonomous vehicles becoming much easier to incorporate and accept than, say, in a city environment. That's why, again, one of the areas where we see autonomy being adopted quickly is long haul trucking, right? Where again you're out on the freeway, you don't everything is much better controlled than say in an urban environment.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I know a lot of people worry about automation coming for everyone's jobs, but it sounds like there's going to be a lot of technology jobs that come out of the acceleration of autonomous vehicles. So earlier you mentioned that cities play a role as well, in addition to the other two factors, being the old automotive industries and mobility. What role do the cities have in next generation mobility?
So cities, in my mind, and this is what I also write in this new book, have to take a leadership role in ushering new mobility. Now, not every city will do that, but I think they have a great opportunity, and they have a great opportunity because they are the providers of the physical infrastructure, the roads, the sidewalks, the curb, the parking locations, but they can also be the providers of the appropriate digital infrastructure. I mean, so again, imagine all of these autonomous vehicles or automated vehicles will need much more than the physical signage that we're used to today. We will need the equivalent of electronic signage. We need, as I said before, the right data flows for everybody to be informed of what's going on. So the cities can play a big role there as well. Then they do have public transportation networks, which are again they can play a very important role in this holistic view of mobility. In fact, one of the points that I'm making early on in the book is that today urban mobility, whether it is for passenger transportation or goods delivery, is really a set of three silos. You have private vehicles, whether it is for owned by fleets or by individuals. You have mobility services that are another silo, and then you have public transportation that is a third silo. And today, in most cities, these three entities do not collaborate. So going forward, cities can play a very important role in bringing together, at the very least, mobility services and public transportation networks. And I think eventually, most likely by the end of this decade, you have automakers joining in those kind of new networks that will be created. So cities can play a very big role in that. And again, depending on the role they choose to play, they can be simple smart cities providing infrastructure, in other words, and nothing more. They can be transportation coordinators, where they're starting now to better monetize their infrastructure and start combining their public transportation networks with at least mobility services networks. Or it can be, if you take it the other extreme, they can actually be transportation or mobility orchestrators, where they can play almost like the equivalent of air traffic controller of for ground transport, for ground mobility, right? And in this point, you have good delineation of spaces where, for example, vehicles are not allowed, to other places where you have multimodal mobility, and you're better able to orchestrate how the various modalities and the various providers of these modalities can work together in order to provide, go back to this, how we started this conversation, this uh, affordable, safe, and convenient transportation that is environmentally friendly and also equitable.
Do you see any cities that are kind of leading the charge in this regard?
Well, we're starting to see examples of cities that are experimenting in these areas, and some of them are farther along than others. So, if I look at here in the U.S., I'll say, experimentation is both. Phoenix is experimenting both with Waymo and with Neuro on the goods delivery. Waymo obviously in passenger transportation, Neuro with goods delivery. If I look at Europe, I'll say Paris, Berlin, and maybe Madrid a little bit are doing are having quite a few programs. Berlin, for example, there's a very active program to integrate their all their public transportation modalities with microtransit, as well as some other micro mobility services. Paris, you have a very active mayor there that is both reconfiguring the urban space to accommodate to provide more access to micromobility, and again combined with public transportation and restrictions on where privately owned vehicles can go. Not always she's not always the favorite of drivers, because that creates certain issues on where they can drive and where they cannot. And then in Asia, we're seeing, obviously, I think the poster child for all this is Singapore, that has an extremely attractive vision and is putting it into action little by little. We see Shanghai in China as having actually a uh, quite good vision on and the corresponding implementation. Um, and so again, and I'm sure there are other cities that I may not be doing justice to right now, but you asked for just a few examples, and I wanted to give examples from every region.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a great answer. I was hoping you were going to say my city, San Diego. I know we've done some experiments down there too, but we can't all be
Well,
highlights.
well, yeah. Again, what is interesting to me is when I give talks about the book. And the book is less than a year old, but there are already a number of things that have changed. Some of them due to the pandemic, but also a lot of them because of how fast mobility is changing itself. Right, with new modalities, with new thinking. So there are probably about 100, I mean, based on the most recent statistics that I have, there are probably about 160 to 200 cities, somewhere in that ballpark, that are actually experimenting in significant ways about how to deal with new mobility.
Well, let's stop there. I'm going to encourage the listeners to buy the book if they want to learn more. Okay, so you also mentioned, data being the connective tissue or the glue for this new mobility. How does data drive value creation?
So, first of all, I think what is important for your audience to understand is that when we talk about data, mobility related data, we're talking about several different types of data. There is the data, for example, that is generated by the infrastructure. There is the data that's generated by the vehicle as it is looking to move in an environment. There's the data that's generated within the cabin of the vehicle, and many other forms of data. So each of these types of data, when they can be combined appropriately and depending on the combination, they can provide different forms of value. So, for example, a city can use this type of data to decide how to price mobility within its boundaries. So I think in the even today, if you look at Singapore, for example, different streets, different roads can be priced differently depending on the time of day, and that's a way of controlling the flow of traffic, as well as obviously for the city to generate revenues from that from those assets that they have. And there are already even companies that are helping startups that are starting to help cities on how to best monetize their infrastructure using this type of data. We're working with companies that are using this type of data in order to monetize the cabin. Okay, so I'm providing a service, or I'm providing convenience to the occupants of the cabin, and in the meantime, I'm monetizing them. There are companies that can use this kind of data. I mean, again, we're working with a few automakers that want to use this kind of data to streamline their manufacturing, to reduce their warranty costs, to determine what kind of services to offer to the owners of the vehicle. So again, the point being is that we need to understand that we're not talking about one type of data, we're talking about multiple types of data. And these types can be blended in different ways, and depending on the way that they're blended and the way that they can be exploited through AI, they provide different value. One last example I will mention is if you look at the so-called super apps. These are the applications that are running on mobile phones that are typically offered by a few of the mobility services companies, such as we've started by Grab in Singapore, where you can use your application now not only in order to order a ride-hailing service, but to order a lot more other services, that many of which are transportation related. So bring me my food, or bring me even the service person who is going to provide me with some service in my home. So again, all of this generates data and takes advantage of data in order to be able to offer them.
Next, let's talk about the business models. What are the prevalent ways to monetize next generation mobility?
To date, the most of us have experienced, at least has been the transactional model. So I ask for a ride, or I take a ride using a shared scooter or a shared bike or whatever, and I pay a fee based on distance, based. It's a transaction based model. But we're starting to see now the emergence of subscription models, the emergence of advertising-based models. I talk a little bit about that in the book, and also more recently of loyalty-based models, where, in other words, your loyalty towards either a network or a specific company is rewarded and can be redeemed, very much like we have seen in the case of airlines. Where you accumulate miles, and you can then redeem the miles for either flights or other services that the airline provides. I think we'll see more and more of that in the ground transportation industry.
And how about risks? Talk about risks that might impact the transformation of transportation.
So let's start with the vehicle. We are moving from a mechanical vehicle where a lot of the intelligence was provided by discrete physical components, and a lot of the function was provided by such components, to a vehicle that is software defined. So we're working right now with a number of automakers, helping them create that software defined vehicle and helping them understand what is the AI, in our case, what is the AI that needs to be part of that vehicle. But the future vehicle, even if it's not fully autonomous, it's definitely going to be software defined. So once we start talking about a software-defined vehicle, now we have to start facing all of the, and of course we have software-defined infrastructure, and to support that vehicle, we have to face all the risks that are associated with software, from bugs to network problems to cybersecurity to again everything that is to data issues that that may lead to faulty models. So this is one large class of risks. The second class of risks is this vehicle becomes, and the service that is provided around this vehicle become increasingly intelligent. We have all the issues associated with AI, and primarily issues of bias, issues of ethics. And I think that, again, in the same way that we broadly start to face to start addressing rather the bias and ethics relating to broader AI, I think we will have to deal with this specific topic in the context of mobility. Again, because we want to be able to provide this safe, affordable, convenient mobility to everybody. I think that AI and AI ethics will create another class of risks. And then the final, in my mind, the final large class of risks, and you mentioned a little bit of that a few minutes ago, relates to employment. So we will, as the automation increases, whether it is the manufacturing automation, whether it is the driving automation, I think we will see certain positions becoming less attractive while other positions are being created. I think also I would be remiss not to mention that what the pandemic has shown us is that telework is a lot more possible than we ever thought of in the past. So in other words, more people can work from home compared to what we thought of. And I think that will also, that shift, depending on how it is embraced by organizations, whether it is government or corporates, that shift will also have an impact on mobility and maybe as a result on employment. So to me, these are three very large classes of risks that we have to understand and deal with as we face new mobility.
Yeah, those are certainly some big ones. Let's move on to sort of the closing period. Are there some areas of new mobility where startups can have an upper hand against the existing incumbents?
We have been counting, so I should say that from our firm's perspective, we have been counting on the importance of software and on the importance of software both in developing a vehicle. So, for example, we have invested in Metamoto, which was a company that provides a simulation for a software simulator for autonomous vehicles. We had invested, it was acquired by Fortelix. We invested in a company called Understand.ai that uses AI in order to automatically label the data that is being used to create the AI models that autonomous vehicles utilize. So we see great opportunities in the vehicle creation phase. We're investors in Divergent 3D, for example, which is developing a new manufacturing system that uses additive manufacturing technologies for new mobility vehicles. we then see opportunities in these new value chains because they're going to be, as I said, there's going to be a wealth of services that are going to be made possible, whether it is services to better orchestrate a fleet or to in order to deliver people and goods, whether it is to do predictive diagnosis. We recently invested, for example, in a German company called Awake Mobility that is providing predictive diagnosis for fleets. And we've also recently invested in a company called Miles, which is providing a loyalty program for ground mobility and extensively uses AI in order to understand how to help consumers monetize their mobility patterns. So again, startups think we're going to play a big role in this area. We also in providing maybe certain parts of the stack that enables autonomous mobility. We have not invested in vehicles or in areas that are capital intensive because we think that those are better suited for larger corporations than for startups.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of opportunities. Okay, let's end on this question, and it's a fun one. What's the most important question about new mobility that I didn't ask in this interview?
I think it is important to understand what are the timelines that we're talking about. A couple of years ago, if you were to believe the press and everything that was being talked about, you would think that by now we will all be driving in an autonomous vehicle. And I think that people do not appreciate both how hard and the important technologies are to develop and deploy, but also how much time it takes in order to start implementing and rolling these new capabilities out in scale. I've said both in the book and my public speaking, I say that new urban mobility is going to be implemented on a city by city basis. It's not going to be an entire country, embracing at the same time. So I think that we need to be patient in as we see all these developments coming into our lives. Uh, but again, the timelines are important here.
All right, thank you for that answer. Evangelos, before we go, what's the best way for the listeners to reach you and Synapse partners?
So we have a pretty good website. So through our website, they can www.synapsepartners.co is the best way to reach us, and from there they can reach me. I'm pretty active in a variety of channels, whether it is LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. And but anyway, we're all pretty good about responding to everybody who wants to be in touch with us.
All right. Well, we're going to end the show there. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a rating. Evangelos, thank you for joining the show today. We appreciate your time and making this time to share with us.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.